Добрий день. Можна. Добрий день, пані та панове.
Good morning, dear ladies and gentlemen. The Ukrainian Crisis Media Center starts its work, and our first briefing today is when will Yarema be punished? The participants are Ihor Gudz, MP from People's Forum Front Party, Roman Maselko, an activist and lawyer of the Avtomaidan, and Anastasia Chernogorska, who is a project coordinator at the Open Dialogue Foundation. Good morning, dear friends. I'm very grateful to the Open Dialogue Foundation for inviting me to take part in this briefing. As an MP, I would tell you what charges I have against Mr. Yarema and why I think that dismissal of him from the General Prosecutor's Office is too little if we talk about him. I think I have my own charges against Mr. Yarema because when there was Maidan, 3 criminal cases were launched against me in Lutsk. I had to carry an electronic bracelet, and I was under house arrest. And Mr. Yarema was at that time at Maidan, and we all pinned great hopes on him. But while he was in the office later, he did almost nothing to justify our hopes. I was also one of the signatories to the letter that claimed that Mr. Yarema should not be Prosecutor General, and evidently the President heeded us. But my key message today is, you know, I talked to my voters, because I'm from territorial constituency, and people are worried, not because the person was dismissed. You know, there is a discussion about Hontareva, who is head of the National Bank, because her dismissal would not solve the issue. We're talking here about inactivity and inaction of our law enforcers who should be brought to responsibility. I'm not a judge and I'm not a law enforcer. I cannot name you the articles according to which he should be made responsible, but I think that in many directions his time in office should be characterized as criminal inaction while in the office. You'll get a report on his activities now, and I am emphasizing the problems of Maidan now. As an MP, I think that we should not stop at this, and every next Prosecutor General, the Minister of Interior, or the head of the Security Service of Ukraine should understand that their cases won't be solved by their dismissal alone if their activity has negative impact. Law enforcers should be responsible according to the current legislation for their inaction. So I personally think that this discussion should not end. A number of my colleagues, when they got to know that I am taking part in this briefing, said, why do you need to do this? Because Yarema was dismissed. But I tell you, no, this is not the case. The current Prosecutor General Shokin and others should understand that if they are criminally inactive, then they will be punished according to the criminal code. So I'm ready to coordinate my activity with Maidan activists, with those people who suffered during Maidan from the actions of the criminal regime of Yanukovych, and regrettably, a year after Maidan, those people who were torturing Maidaners have not been punished yet. So my position is clear-cut, and here I am to state it. So that's all from me, because I have to join the parliament now. But if you have questions personally to me, I'm ready to answer. Are there any questions to MP Gudz? No questions. Thank you for hearing about my position. Goodbye. And now, Roman.
Good morning, Maselko Roman. I am a lawyer that defended the activists of Avtomaidan after the Revolution of Dignity against the law enforcers that chased them with false evidences, and there are a lot of people of Avtomaidan participants. To Meshgiria, for instance, there were 1,000 cars and men, and 600 of them were punished. And now we are trying to prosecute people that were related to that, and the scale is very impressive of that action. This issue is very topical, and probably it is more important that to open a prosecution against certain traffic inspector that tried to chase some Avtomaidan, but to have this unavoiding of punishment, and if a new person to come will have a personal responsibility, and he will be dismissed finally if I'm not acting properly. I'm a lawyer, so probably I will concentrate on the facts. Why we're telling you that Yarema failed to fulfill his duty. Yesterday I came back from Lviv, and incidentally I was participants of certain events that is related to Maidan. Probably you remember that 19th January at Bogatyrska Street last year, Berkut people, Berkut officers, they overspeeded a car where Yaroslav Gonchar, Avtomaidan activist, was driving, and the Berkut people, they smashed his car. They damaged doors to the car, and the driver himself, he was heavily beaten. He had a fracture of his hand, and so he lost his conscience, and some other people, they stopped again in their cars, and that was registered by the video register. And two of Berkut people, they didn't wear any masks, so two of them were identified, and they were identified as Lviv traffic inspectors of Berkut people. And these special forces, Berkut people, they until now worked in the militia, in police. They were dismissed only after Avtomaidan people came to the proper law enforcement entities, and they pleaded to be again employed, and one of them was in fact employed with the reimbursement of his salary. Why and which way the prosecutor's office is related to this? Because I asked the investigators in the prosecutor's office of Kiev if they have this case filed. So in the beginning they said that yes, there's nothing like this case, but they even didn't have expert evaluation. 1 year passed. No expert evaluation was made for this car, as well as any damage was not identified, and there was not only one, it was 4 cars at least. And the prosecutor's office had to first of all dismiss people from their positions. Police as well failed to fulfill their to exercise their duties, and they just the facts are shocking, and it's an evidence that from the prosecutor's office we have this crime of omission. Some other reasons I could mention, but at least we could speak about this criminal omission of duties. Probably the prosecutor's office is overloaded, and of course, in fact, there are a lot of cases, a lot of files, but those cases I'm speaking of, they are indicative in sense of our next development as a nation. If it will be the same approach to investigation of such crimes, then we may say that all of our efforts were wasted, because, for instance, we don't have any pressure from the broad public over prosecutors. And this is one evidence. Another fact is chasing of Avtomaidan people for their trip to Mezhgiria, for their campaign actually. It was 1,000 cars traveled to Yanukovych and traveled back. And the vast majority of that people traveled there. They had subpoena from state inspection that they violated certain laws, and they filed around 600 protocols, and many of them, around 200 people, they were deprived of their driving license, and many of them were fined. And of course, even then and now it is even clearer that there were no violations from their side, and it was fake reports from traffic inspectors, because they were not present at the spots they claimed they stayed at that time. So I never seen anything like that, like the scheme of prosecution or scheme of chasing of the activists. And when the revolution won, Yarema was one of us. He shared the barricades with us. He was fighting against the system, and I expected him to finalize this case, because it was very evident over there that documents are in hand. It's not Yanukovych who left country. And to my surprise, starting from May, June and July, all the cases were closed. Only when we came to the General Prosecutor's office, in one day all the cases were renovated, means reopened. The grounds for closure of all the cases was that prosecutor's office decided that a report of traffic inspector is not a document. That's why to say to have this fake is not a criminal offense. So for you to understand, the prosecutor's office is able to influence investigators, because when we came to Mr. Yarema that this is the situation like this and that, and he said, no, investigator, he is an independent position and I couldn't influence him, and he promised us, yes, I will influence him, I will try at least. And then when we met Yarema, all the cases were reopened, and in 10 days the first traffic inspector was announced as a suspect. So traffic inspectors, they didn't do it on their own. They were ordered from somebody, not from Yanukovych, but from some other authority for them. So, and I asked who issued that orders, but I had an answer. We don't have any evidences, we don't have anything, but please do remember, we had searches, we had seizures, we had everything, we had falsified eyewitnessing, etc. So The prosecutor's office in last month did much larger, bigger work than in previous 6 months. So the only thing you need is goodwill to do something. So this is only one case related to Avtomaidan, and in other cases like beating of activists in Shorsa street, still nobody has been identified of the Spetsnaz Berkut that was involved in that. If you want to do something, you do something. So it's not a special case. So I ask myself why the situation is like this. Why the traffic inspectors, they falsified protocols, falsified documents. Why they beaten drivers. Why judges made their false decisions. Of course, probably the laws are not perfect here, but the key problem in this country is absolute feeling of never I will be punished. And it is much easier for them to fulfill any order, to obey to any order, to take bribes, rather than to work along the lines of any law, any regulation. So we do not have many problems with our legislation. We have problems with responsibility for violating of the law. And the key principle of any jurisprudence is inevitability of punishment. Means that any violation must be followed by responsibility, by punishment. So it is very important in this case to tell Mr. Yarema and anybody, Mr. Shokin, Mr. Makhnitsky, anybody who who occupies any position must understand that in this country we are overcoming certain changes. The changes are that I have to obey to the rules, otherwise I will be punished. It is very important for us to start those processes, and for Mr. Yarema, not only we should tell him you have failed, but we must exercise a proper investigation of the facts and figures, and to understand why he failed to exercise his duty. It's Article 367 of the Criminal Code, and it is a great hit toward the reputation of the law enforcement agencies. Or Mr. Yarema would tell us, no, I am clean, I did in full conscience, etc. So I hope that it will not end with this press conference. We must push it ahead, and we must demand that the cases be filed, and that this will be an objective and unbiased investigation. If we show that the general prosecutor is openly investigated, and we must show that this is not a political bullying, but this is an open, transparent, and proper investigation. Then we will launch a mechanism that will renew our country.
Good morning, dear colleagues. You have already heard a number of facts that testify to the inaction of Yarema. Regrettably, this is not an exhaustive list. We can continue it. In particular, the General Prosecutor's Office under Mr. Yarema was sabotaging the illustration process. For instance, prosecutors who had to be illustrated did take part in a seminar that took place in the anti-terrorist operation zone, and this was considered a participation in the anti-terrorist operation, and they were exempt from illustration, like, for instance, Prosecutor Wontovsky. You have already heard about the investigation, the failure investigation of the crimes during Maidan, and also about the officials of the Yanukovych times and improper investigations in the prosecutor's office. And because of this, European countries started to exclude some officials from sanctioned lists, like Sergei Arbuzov, and there were no cases launched at all against such officials as Boyko, Kluyev, Tabachnik, and there are no investigations like this, and the prosecutor's office says there's only a year since it happened. We don't have enough time to work on with all the documents, but somehow they do have time to prosecute opposition leaders from non-democratic countries. For instance, there's an extradition request against the Kazakhstan oppositioner Mukhtar Ablazov. They want to extradite him from France. They want to extradite his fellow oppositioner Roman Solochenko from UK. And there's a suspicion that these texts are dictated by the prosecutor's office of Kazakhstan, so our prosecutor's office has time for this, but they can't find time to investigate things more urgent for Ukraine. Also, there's no action about calls against Ukraine's territorial integrity in the east of Ukraine and in Crimea. They are not being properly investigated. We collected these examples and other examples in the report published by our Open Dialogue Foundation. And months ago, we submitted a request to the prosecutor's office with the facts about inaction of Yarema, but we got a response from them that says that these facts are not proof substantial to launch the criminal case. So now we are drafting a statement about criminal action with legal foundations, background, and we are going to submit it very soon, and we will wait for the reply from the General Prosecutor's Office whether they will launch a criminal case about the facts that testify to criminal inaction by Yarema. And bringing him to responsibility is very important, because this is going to be a signal for other officials who are still in their offices, that will make them know that any sabotage, any inaction, any corruption will be punished, and this is going to be an important signal that will hold officials back from their embezzlement and abuse of power. So we call upon the public not to lose attention to these actions and to pressurize the representatives of authorities so that everyone who deserves it is punished. For instance, that Yarema is not just dismissed and forgotten, but that he is punished in a proper way. Any questions, colleagues? We have a question from the Ukrainian Crisis Media Center. Well, one thing is about inaction and if it is not investigated, but some other thing is when the cases are closed in a silent manner, in a covert manner, then there's a suspicion that the crimes are going on, and there's a number of influential people in the law enforcement bodies who will be closing these cases, and they will be hoping that those cases will be forgotten because of the flow of time. And this means that nothing has changed since Maidan, and there is enough people who want to cover these crimes. Regrettably, we can really say that there is that they stand behind each other and not so many changes as we would like to see. And one of the mechanisms that should be used is lustration against the officials who are inactive and who continue the actions that testify to the fact that law enforcement bodies now are among the most corrupt in Ukraine. Yes, they still cover crimes. Roman. Really, to fight the phenomena that we used to have is hard, is difficult. I can't tell that Mr. Yarema had an easy case on his hands, and if I have seen that he was sincerely fighting those phenomena, we could have said, yes, no question about his. He was fighting and maybe he failed, but when we started to work with these cases in March and April, we did see that some of the investigators were doing everything, although without great enthusiasm. We have to recognize that, you know, I'm afraid to presume the percentage, but at least 50% in Kiev, in particular, did take part in persecuting people during Maidan. You know, the figure about this drive to Mezhyhirya, 415 inspectors of traffic police were involved who composed reports and testimony. Do you have the data how many of them still are in their offices? This information is still almost classified. We haven't got this information from Mr. Avakov. Even now, we were sending requests through a special investigation commission of the parliament, through Mr. Yavorivsky and Mr. Sobolev now. I met him personally. Regrettably, we have to recognize that there is a huge sabotage on the part of the law enforcement structures, and the police are actually holding the facts with their teeth and don't let them go. Mr. Yarema was saying they do not have instruments to bring about, but you probably heard about the search in the premises, on the premises of the traffic police in Kiev and in the Pechersk district court. Well, if they don't give you testimony, then come and get it. I also, well, Mr. Avakov said in his Facebook that 102 traffic inspectors were dismissed, but in reality those were 97 who were dismissed. We collected surnames in an unofficial way, and we still do not have an official list of those who were dismissed. And from among traffic inspectors alone, 415 people were involved in falsifications. Then 126 judges, 106 who have just brought innocent people to responsibility with a whistle, and then take beatings and shootings and the ban on rallies in different regions. For instance, Mr. Ihor's case. This is hundreds and hundreds of people who are still in the system and still holding responsible positions. We should do this, otherwise it would all have been in vain. And as you say, the cases are being closed. But this was in agreement with those who did not want those cases investigated, and someone has told me that this is probably the higher aim, not to rock the boat, but you know, this boat is already rocking, and if we do not make it clear, then it will sink. lack of attention or desire, but I would like people to have a sincere wish to do something. Otherwise, we will be in a failure. And people think that if there's no punishment, then there's an inclination to break the law. The principle of inevitable punishment should work. Thank you, Roman. Regrettably, we have to close down this briefing because we have the next coming up. Thank you very much. Come again. We are ready to provide you with an opportunity to give us next information.